Hey everybody, today I want to talk about a specific thing regarding the view in your racing simulator game. And not the field of view, not some other things, but really something specific. I want to zoom in on that. Because with Assetto Corsa, which I do enjoy playing, and ACC as well, and now AC Rally, this thing that I really would like to have in games isn't there. The view is a bit of a subjective thing. Some people like a larger field of view, some people want like shakes. You can have motion based on the g-forces where your head moves forward or back or left and right. All these things are legit in the sense that maybe you prefer that. So what I would like to have is every sim has its custom view menu where you can tweak a whole bunch of stuff. It comes with the preset that the developers think is good, but you can tweak to your liking, and that should be fine. So there isn't really a single thing that is right or wrong, but that doesn't mean that some options shouldn't be there. More options is more better. So what option am I talking about? Well, first here we have a great looking car and a house. This will be important later. And I know what you're saying. It's cold, it's November. I put the heat on, so these people in this house are very comfortable. Don't be putting those angry comments in. It's very, very cozy in there. Unless, of course, this is what you see in your rally car doing 100 miles an hour and you're this close to the house. Won't be good. But the distance is very important. That's what I want to focus on. All I want to do is look in the forward direction, and then I want to separate two things. You could have a springy neck. This is a thing in quite a few sims, I think, and it kind of makes sense, right? You drive straight and then you go over a bump, and when the car goes up, your neck is a bit springy and your head goes down a little bit. So actually regarding the whirls, your head is in the same height as it was before you took the bump. And if you take a jump, the car moves down, your head is sort of going up like that. That kind of makes sense, and this is what some sims do, and it seems legit. However, this does not really stabilize the world that you see. And maybe some of you think, well, this should be a nice sort of stabilization of the car going over bumps. But it is not at all, and that's what I want to demonstrate. Another option in Sims that I really don't like, but it could just as well be there, because why not, is lock to horizon. And the problem there, in my opinion, is you go up a hill and you stare into the road, like Eau Rouge, you stare into the tarmac instead of looking where the car is going. And when you go downhill, you also stare forward, so you cannot see the house you're about to hit. The house is now important because we're going to literally zoom out. So I mentioned distance is important, because a lot of the time you're not that close to the house because you saw what happened, we crash into it. So here is a 200 meter distance from the car to the house. Fairly typical, who knows, it depends on the racetrack, on the stage. But the faster you're going, the more straight the road will be and the further ahead objects are likely to be. So let's say 200 meters is a fair value. And you can see a typical field of view here, 30 degrees vertical, kind of what you have with triple screens a lot of the time. And then your view is straight on and it hits the door. Why is this distance so important? Well, imagine taking a bump, as we do here. If we zoom in on the car, you see the front wheels are now on a bump. And if we have a rigidly mounted camera, that means we are now looking up slightly. This is 1 degree, it's almost nothing, but you look up a bit and then a bit further along, the rear wheels are on the bump, and that means you look down a little bit. Now, if that is right in front of you, it doesn't really matter, but the further it is away, the bigger effect it has. When we were looking straight ahead, we were looking like just underneath this window, and now the front wheels are on the bump. Look how much higher we are looking. We went from underneath this window to almost the top of the house. In this case, 200 meters, 1 degree of pitch angle is 3.5 meters that we are now looking up. So it's only a tiny bump that we are going over, and of course there are all sorts of bumps and undulations, and that means that things far away move vertically a lot, and I find that quite distracting. If we draw this in a 16:9 image, this is correct as in the scale of what we just saw. This is your house and we're driving towards it. But now let's superimpose, is that the word, the movement that we would get by going over that 1 degree pitch up and 1 degree pitch down. So here you see the amount of shake that you get in the house 200 meters away from going over that tiny bump. The house moves quite a bit. And if you're going fast over all sorts of bumps, you get that really shaky stuff in the distance. And remember, the further it is away, the more it will move. So the more space you have in front of you, you're on a fast straight, the more things in the distance will shake. And the harder it is to focus on, that braking zone 300 meters away that you have to nail. Everything moves. It's very tricky for me to focus on. So far we've sort of seen three things. You can have a rigidly mounted camera. We looked at this vertically springy neck. And we also saw the lock to horizon. Well, it looks quite different, but maybe you don't expect the middle one. So, of course, if we have the rigid camera, we get a lot of shake and up and down movement in distant objects. And if we have lock to horizon, we get none. It's very stable. But if we have a vertically springy neck, I don't see a difference. There's barely a pixel in it. That's because your neck might go up, your head might go up and down 5 centimeters, but we saw there was like a 3.5 meter up and a 3.5 meter down movement. So 5 centimeters on the 7 or 3.5 meters is almost nothing. So a springy neck does nothing to stabilize distant objects. In fact, at 200 meters, this 5 centimeters over 3.5 meters is 1.4% or something. So you get 98% the same shaking. It's really insignificant, even though maybe, it feels like, if we have a squishy neck, we'll stabilize the horizon, but it doesn't. But we've also seen lock to horizon is bad for driving up hills. You're staring into the road, driving down the hills, you can't see what you're gonna crash into. So we don't want lock to horizon, but maybe we also don't want a rigid camera, and maybe there is reason to use a springy neck. Maybe it's also for like lateral forces. I definitely want those options in my game, but it doesn't stabilize distant objects. But if we don't want lock to horizon, and maybe it makes sense to have an option, if you don't want it, you don't use it, to stabilize distant objects, what do we do? So I believe here is what you kind of want to happen. If you drive really slowly over bumps, then it is fine that the distant objects move. It's not distracting, it's not shaky, jittery. Plus this also means if you take Eau Rouge, for example, that after half a second or a tenth of a second, the view is there, but it doesn't react super fast. So if you have slow bumps, then the pitch of the camera is pretty in line with where the car is pointing. But if you go fast over all sorts of bumps, maybe we only want a little bit of shaking in vertically in the horizon. This could be a good way to avoid lock to horizon, but even if we go fast in Eau Rouge, in a few tenths of a second, the camera will still be pointing up. So you always point the camera where the car is going, but just with, it takes a tiny little while to get there. Now, I fully understand you've not taken me seriously up to this point in the video, but here's a spreadsheet, so now you know you're talking to a real, brilliant, genius individual who's come up with the view stab-o-matic. No, this is a way to visualize what's happening. In blue here is literally a bump you're riding over. So it's the pitch angle of the vehicle. If you drive slowly over a hump like that, you go like that, and then you go over the top, and then you go down. So imagine a car driving over that. And then in orange, we have the camera pitch angle. And currently we have the limit for the pitch velocity of the camera set to 0. So as soon as there is any pitch in the camera, which there is because the car is changing its pitch all the time, we say, well, we don't allow any pitch, so the camera just looks straight ahead. This is lock to horizon, basically. So the car takes that hump, and the view is just straight ahead. So initially it's like lock to horizon. You look into the road, and then on top you start to look into the distance and you don't see the road anymore. Now what happens if we set an orientation rate limit for the camera? So we look at the velocity with which the car is changing the pitch, and then we say, well, we cap it beyond a certain point, and if the change in pitch velocity, the angle change in the car, the pitch angle change is greater than a certain amount, we cap it and we limit a rate at which the camera is allowed to pitch up and down. So if we limit it to 0, it will always look straight ahead. But if we limit it a bit less, you see here something interesting happens. We drive over this hump, and you see the camera pitch does change, but not as fast as the car changes its pitch going over the hump. So it's sort of lagging behind a little bit, but as soon as we go down, the pitch also changes of the camera again. Alright, so we can set that to such a level that you don't notice it on like this is a slow hump you're taking, and then everything is fine and the camera is just like firmly attached to the vehicle. It follows it directly and this is very slow, it's not distracting. But now, let's say we go faster. We've upped the speed, we take those humps faster now, and then we run into this limit because the car pitches faster than we allow the camera to pitch up and down. And now you see the camera pitch doesn't change as much as that the car pitch angle changes. And the faster we go, you see the bigger this difference becomes. And here we are really shaking, like this is a cobblestone road, for example. The car is something like that, but the camera only changes, well, a quarter, less than a quarter of the pitch than the car does. This looks really simple because it is. It's a few lines of code and it does wonders in my opinion. There is this myth about it though, that esports type circles, you hear the people say, well, we need to fix the camera because otherwise I cannot feel the car or something like that. I think that is nonsense because you get exactly the same information, but you just get it in a different way. Because what happens if you have the camera rigid, then we get the shaky houses in the distance, but the cockpit is going to be steady. So you also sort of get a sense of the bumpiness of the road, but you can't see it in the vehicle. In the cockpit it's staying steady, but you can see it in the shakiness of the environment. But if you use lock to horizon or the reduced lock to horizon that we just shown in the spreadsheet, things get different, but you get the same information. This is then what happens. The house in the distance is steady or mostly steady, depending on your orientation rate for the camera versus the car. But now your cockpit shakes a little bit. So you still get the information that you're driving over bumps and how severe that is. And you can get from that anything you need regarding, oh, this is a certain surface and I need to be careful with the brakes because it's so bumpy, maybe I lock up, whatever. You get all that information while still being able to focus on the things in the distance, and that's important in racing in my opinion. You need to plan ahead and see where you will be in 1 or 2 or 3 seconds, see it clearly, and then decide how to enter the turn and what to do. So the less that is shaking, then the better it is. Now, before we go to the sim to actually look at this, there's one more thing to talk about, of course. What is realistic? I've already told you it's kind of subjective what you want. Well, there are different camps, as always, it's always divided. Some people say, well, your brain and your eye and everything, it stabilizes the horizon. I think that is true to some extent. Imagine your eyeballs being completely bolted to the car and then you go over a cobblestone road. Your neck and your brain, I think, stabilizes the view. So there is a point in that. But there are also plenty of stories of drivers with like flat spotted tires being unable to see because the shaking is violent. So up to a point, I think your eyes and brain and your neck filters out the pitching of the car, but not everything. But like I said, it's hard to say. And this is such a simple way to adjust it. Make a nice menu with all sorts of GeForce based tweaks for the view and just include that pitch camera orientation rate limit that I've just shown you in a spreadsheet. But now let's go into the sim and see what it looks like and if it actually is true what I'm saying. I am approaching a very bumpy road now, and this is the camera firmly attached to the car. So we go slow, 30 kilometers an hour. You see the cockpit is steady and the world moves up and down quite a lot, but we are going fast. This is not super distracting. But if we go faster, this is annoying. And this is kind of what you get on a bumpy rally stage. And then try to focus on your entry there, it's really difficult. But this is what it looks like with the camera bolted firmly to the car. Now there is a limit to the orientation rate for pitch on the camera. So it will catch up with where the car is going through Eau Rouge, for example. After a few tenths of a second it caught up, but it filters it out a little bit. So let's go really slow. What we've shown in the spreadsheet, the view should go up and down roughly the same. You see, we get quite a bit of movement on the house, and not so much on the cockpit. But the faster we go, you see now the house moves quite a bit still, but now the cockpit moves a lot, because we do not allow the camera to keep up with that violet pitching of the car. So it still moves because your camera is still connected to the car. It's not just look at lock to horizon and going up a hill you can't see anything. But this is a way, it's much easier to focus on the house when it isn't moving as much. And the faster you go, the more it will be filtered out. See, now going pretty fast, and you see it's almost a steady house now. So this is the simplest code, limit the orientation rate of the camera. And it goes from a wobbly house, and I don't really care about the house, I care about my braking points and my entry and what the road looks like, being almost unable to see it. And then the faster you go, the more it stabilizes the horizon. So it's super simple, and I really think it would be minutes of work to add this. And then it could be a slider, because it could be lock to horizon, sure, if you want that. And it could be lock to car, and in between you change the orientation rate in pitch of the camera. Simple trick. Sims that do not have this I really find difficult to play. I used to play with a fixed camera, but finding this orientation rate, it calms everything down so much. I can see where I'm going so much better. And if you don't want it, that's fine, but have this option in a nice menu. Finally though, I would say there are a few things that are important-ish, maybe objectively, for the view. I don't mind effects to like the camera, but they should be physics-based. Some games have like a shaking effect when you go real fast. I can understand that you want to convey that feeling of, ooh, we're going really fast. But if you get shakes in the camera, it's like, oh, am I driving on cobblestones? It would still shake if you drive on a perfectly smooth surface. So I feel all the camera effects should be physics-based, G-forces and that sort of thing. Yeah, as long as it's physics-based, it can give you information. If you have fake shakes in there, it gives you the impression the car is doing something that it might not be doing. So that's it. Maybe I've explained a bit why just having like some vertical head movement doesn't fix the stability of objects in the distance, and why having a orientation rate limit can be sort of a blend between lock to horizon, which is bad, and lock to car, which is bad. And with a slider you could move in between that. And I feel this is really something that the developers should add to all games. Really, it shouldn't be that difficult, and it's really, yeah, effective in my opinion. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye bye.